Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in the world. We want to welcome you to Make Video Communication Easier with SharePoint. I'm Tom Murphy, General Manager and Editorial Director for Simpler Media Group and CMSWire. I'll be your moderator today. And I just wanted to spend a moment going over our broad agenda. We have about a few minutes for introductions, 35 to 40 minutes with our guest Brian Prigge, and 15 to 20 minutes with a live Q&A featuring you, our audience. A few housekeeping notes before we start. There's a chat function in this operation. You'll see a chat button at the top or bottom on the right side of your screen. Please click on that. It'll open a chat window on your right column. You can direct questions there to all panelists, and we'll be glad to, or comments. If you have any concerns about the program, you can chat with us there. There's also a Q&A tab in the bottom right part of your screen. If you have a question at any point during the program, please pose it there. Our producer will gather those and put them together, and when we get to the Q&A section, we will take your questions. We also have interactive polls in this program. You'll see a slide on the left, but a window will also open on your right. That's where you'll actually vote. It'll look something like this, and you'll see the question and options for the answers. Please click on one of those quickly and then hit the submit button in the lower right part of the screen so that we can count your vote. A little about CMSWire. We're about 11 years old. We have well over 400 editorial contributors, and they write more than 200 articles a month. We have monthly editorial themes, tweet jams, hangouts, webinars, and more. Our primary topic areas are customer experience, digital marketing, social business, enterprise collaboration, and enterprise information management. If you're not already a regular reader of CMSWire, I encourage you to make it part of your daily routine. I think you'll find a lot of information there. A lot of our editorial contributors are folks just like you, practitioners in the field. Our program today is sponsored by RAMP. Its next-generation media content platform makes it easy for companies to manage live and on-demand video and audio content. You can learn more about RAMP at ramp.com. And now it's my distinct pleasure to introduce Brian Prigge. He's the SharePoint architect and product manager, and he leads the implementation of RAMP's suite of video hosting, search, and discovery solutions into custom SharePoint integrations. Brian, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much, Tom. So the first thing I'd like to go over today is sort of the agenda of what we're going to go over in the next half hour or so. First, we're going to go over integrating your video content management platform into your existing CMS. We're going to go over the reasons for that and how that can simplify both your end user experience and your administration experience. We're going to talk about a bit about the video lifecycle and how that actual video content moves through your organization and what hurdles to look out for along the way. At the end of that section, we're going to take your questions, of course. We'll also have a short demo of how to keep your users engaged in your CMS platform. So that brings us, Tom, to our first poll question.
It does indeed. Thanks, Brian, and I'm glad to get right into this. Now, you'll notice, audience, that a window has opened on the right side of your screen, and there's a question there. Within your company, which department is the main driver of video? Great question. Marketing, corporate communications, operations, or something else? And I think if it's multiple choices, you can put other there too. And if you'll click on one of those radio buttons, we will, and then click the submit buttons, we'll be counting our votes. Now, Brian, you have a lot of experience here. I'm going to guess marketing is going to be the lead answer here. What do you think?
You know, Tom, 18 months ago, I would have said that was absolutely the case. I think as we're seeing sort of video evolve in the enterprise, one of the main things we're seeing is the consumerization of video. And so no longer is marketing creating a 20-minute highly produced piece of content. We're seeing 30 to 60-second pieces of content being produced actually on the front lines. So it'll be interesting to see if that's really made its way into the enterprise as deeply as we think it has.
It will be interesting. That's a fascinating factoid there. Our poll has ended, and the results are in. Let's see what they say. The lead answer is, well, it's 31%. 31% corporate communications, 35% had no answer, but 11% said other, and that could be a multiple answer there. 15% said marketing and 8% for operations. Very interesting. Well, I think we're ready to go on with the program. Brian, if you'll go to your next slide.
Sounds good. So when we talk about integration, there are a number of reasons to integrate into your existing CMS system. Just spending a few minutes on the numbers here, that first is 7 out of 10. And according to Gartner, by the end of 2017, 7 in 10 videos in the enterprise will be less than 60 seconds long. And that's really this move towards snackable content. And you look at Vine, you look at Instagram video, and you see those both have very time-limited video abilities. So Vine, of course, is the 6-second videos that were popular several months ago. And Instagram video, I believe, limits you at 15 seconds. And so while that's not necessarily what we're going to be seeing in the enterprise, it does have certain expectations set within your user base to make sure that the content that you are providing fits into that snackable, watch what I need and move on concept. Second number there is 16. By the end of 2016, again, according to Gartner, large companies will stream more than 16 hours of video per user per month. And so when you combine that with 7 out of 10 of those videos being less than 60 seconds long, really what you're looking at is a high volume of content in terms of number of assets that need to be managed. And that management can become very cumbersome when not integrated into your native CMS system. So as we look at the various video life cycles, remember that this is happening on a large quantity of assets, not just the 1 or 2 that are happening today. Within 2 years, we're going to be looking at hundreds of assets needing to be managed, even thousands of assets over the course of many months. Next number is 25%. By the end of 2018, 25% of large organizations will have an explicit strategy to make their corporate computing environments similar to consumer environments. And so when we look at Facebook and we look at Twitter, and then we look at the enterprise side and look at tools like Yammer and Jive and Chatter, those tools are going to become much more integrated from a UI perspective than they are today. And your users are going to start expecting things of that nature from their corporate platforms, just as they have them today from their consumer platforms. And really, ease of use will be driven by consumer websites as opposed to driven by enterprise platforms like they have been in the past. The final number there is 75, and that is 75% of workers at large organizations will interact with various kinds of video more than 3 times daily. And so this goes back to the quantity that we talked about just a moment ago, is when your users are dealing with video, we don't want them to have to jump out to some third-party platform, jump out of the CMS that they're already in, perhaps for customer management or process management, to jump out, watch that video, and come back. If they can watch it all in the same place, all at the same time, that's where you're going to see the most bang for your buck, both from a user perspective, but also from a technology perspective. We've seen a lot of people that are scaling up their authentication platforms and scaling up their their non-CMS video systems specifically for handling video. And we believe that the larger ROI perspective happens, and the largest ROI return is in scaling your infrastructure for the CMS as a whole, not specifically the video portion. So those are really the main reasons to integrate. Those are sort of the top bullet points on why to integrate. Is you have a large quantity of assets that are going to be managed in a very short period of time, and then your same users need to be able to consume that in a seamless fashion. So when we talk about the video lifecycle, we can really break that down into 4 main aspects. We can talk about video creation, video management, video discovery, and then engaging your users. So when we jump into video creation, the number one thing to remember here is that video creation is happening. Video is already being created in your enterprises today, and that can be happening in corporate communications, as was the number one poll response. That can be happening for training content. That can be happening in video conferencing if you're using Link or Polycom or any of the other telepresence devices today. And then employee-generated content. One of the biggest things that we are seeing from a video creation perspective is the ability for the very senior field employees to be able to create a 2-minute video on how to perhaps fix a fuel pump, where it would take them 2 minutes and it takes the junior guys 15. So how do we socialize that knowledge? And employee-generated content is one of the main ways that we're seeing to make that happen. When we move on to managing your content, when we manage our content, there are a number of pieces that we need to take into account, whether that's cross-device compatibility, transcoding, delivery, cross-browser compatibility, or storage. All of those are things that we need to take into account when deciding where to manage our video. And those are all things that are managed by various platforms today. And so when we talk about SharePoint specifically, storage has always been the largest hurdle, right? Because you have your one content database, and as soon as you start dumping videos into that one content database, now your database administrator can't sleep at night. Same with transcoding. When you get down into the bits and bytes of video, transcoding is your biggest piece, and transcoding is where you get from a .mov file to the various formats that can be played on an iPhone, on an Android, in IE, in Chrome, in Firefox, or any of those other browsers. And so the ability to have that happen all seamlessly in one system is very, very important. And the biggest challenge that we've seen is when you are not using a video management system that's integrated into your main CMS, you end up with sort of a piecemeal process. So when you are managing your videos, first you create the asset, which we've gone over is already happening in your environment. And then invariably, without a video content management system in place, you are converting that into one of a few different formats, transcoding that content, and then moving that content again back into your video management system. And so when we integrate that all into your CMS, there's no multi-step process that has to happen. Of course there is, but that's happening through the integration. So what your end users see is uploading that singular piece of content into that CMS system, and then simply getting an email when that multi-step process happens, and there's no manual steps throughout that process. And then when we talk about discovery, this is one of the things that is the hardest for large enterprises to take into account, because when we talk about the hundreds and thousands of assets being created that we talked about just a few moments ago, there are a number of things that play into discovery that make discovery so difficult. And so when we talk about discovery and we talk about making sure that we have access to that content appropriately, really, when we talk discovery in the past, we've been talking about titles and tags. And so if you go out to YouTube, if you go out to Vimeo, if you go out to any of the main consumer platforms, your main pieces are going to be the title and the tag. What's the content called, and what did the content creator think was the main piece of content for that asset? And so when we look at that, it's possible that when you look at, say, a 2-hour town hall video that's simply called 2-hour town hall, and we've tagged it with all of the executives that spoke in that town hall meeting, that you miss that Q2 financial results was at the 1 and 7 minute mark. And of course, you can handle that through the description, and the description can say that you're going over the operational goals, you're going over the functional goals, you're going over the financial results, and then you're looking forward to Q3. but you're not going to be able to find exactly where in that piece of content those specific topics happen, and that's where transcription really comes into play. So when we talk about transcribing content, when we talk about getting down to the word level of what was said in the video, now we have the ability to, within that singular piece of content, be broken out almost into a chapterization format of, here's where we talked about operational goals, here's the specific goal that was mentioned, here's where we talked about functional goals, here's the specific goal that was mentioned, and we can jump to that exact point in the video. So we don't need to tag with Q2 financial results at the hour and 7-minute mark. The user can automatically generate that tagging for themselves, and the system can generate that tag for them as well. This is a very similar concept to in the early 2000s when CMS systems were just coming about and you had these problems with your user uploaded and it was called document 1 because that's exactly what Word had named it automatically. And you upload this content and there it is. And there was no deep search into the document itself. There was no tagging or anything of that nature. It was just, here's document 1, and you have to know what document 1 is to be able to use it. We have a very similar problem going on with video, and transcripts are how we're solving that problem. All right, when we talk about engaging your users, this is where we get into the need for very intentional steps taken to engage your users. So I'm going to go ahead and allow me to bring up a screen share here for just a moment. All right, so this screen share should be coming up, and what we're looking at here is RAMP's site, and so we use this site internally for both showing native integrations into SharePoint, as of course we are able to do, as well as showing best practices around video. So of course RAMP has done a number of webinars, and we can see those in the lower right-hand corner here. Of course, RAMP has several collateral pieces around their integration. But what we're seeing here is not videos on a page as it may appear that we are seeing. What we're seeing is what I call auto-curating content. So the number one thing for engaging your users on sort of a day-by-day basis is the ability to have constantly refreshing content. So every time you log into Facebook, you see different pieces of content. Every time you log into Twitter, you see different pieces of content. Even every time you log into YouTube, you see different pieces of content. And that's because the content is auto-refreshing and self-curating. And so as we log into these various video portals, we need to make sure that every time they log in and every time our users log in, they are seeing fresh content. And we can do that through sorting of the video content that's in the page. And so you see, for example, here in the upper right, we have most popular content. That's going to be the most watched content in the last 14 days. So perhaps in an accounting firm, we have tax time coming up, and there's one particular procedure that you only do during tax time. And so as that piece of content becomes more and more popular, after the first several people discover that content through search, you're going to be able to see that populate up to the most popular content. And now your users down the road don't have to find that and then watch it. They have the ability to simply click on it and move on. And as we get towards quarterly reportings, quarterly topics can come up as opposed to annual topics and so on and so forth. We also have the ability to say within specific channels, much like a YouTube functionality, how popular are videos, so that if we are interested specifically in webinars, where do the webinars come up? The other thing that's important is making sure that we can engage our users within a single page. Jumping out between separate pages does become a little bit cumbersome. So one of the things that's very important is being able to click into a particular video and stay on your same page to watch that video, and be able to click back to any previous content, just like a playlisting functionality, but without necessarily the need to autoplay. As we talk about video content in the enterprise, one of the things that we've seen pain points for in the past is the one person in the middle of the row of cubicles that doesn't have their headset on, perhaps. And so we need to make sure that as your users are adopting video, that we're not causing noise pollution in the office. And so one of the ways to do that is to show a big, bright thumbnail that draws the user in. But as they start to hear audio, they are automatically reminded that they need to put on their headsets and things of that nature. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing this screen. And that brings us, Tom, to our second poll question.
It does indeed, Brian, and it's a great presentation so far. The next poll has popped up on the right side of the screen, and I'll invite our listeners to read the question and vote for their choice, and then click the Submit button in the bottom right. And the question is, what version of SharePoint does your organization run? Is it SharePoint Online / Office 365, SharePoint 2013, SharePoint 2010, or another or older version? Please make your choice, and we will tally the results. Brian, I'm guessing that most people are still on 2010 or 2013 or a legacy version. Does that fit in with your findings?
That does. We're seeing more and more companies sort of freezing their SharePoint 2010 environment and looking towards either SharePoint 2013 or SharePoint Online. And the interesting thing that we found specifically with SharePoint Online is that users may not even know that they're using SharePoint Online because, of course, in Office 365, they've just labeled it Sites. And so Microsoft is sort of moving away from the SharePoint name just a little bit. And so users may be using SharePoint without even necessarily realizing it.
Really interesting, and I'm sure that'll be one of the topics we'll get into the Q&A session later on. And I want to remind our listeners that you can submit any questions that you have through the Q&A tab. We'll gather those and get to them at the end of the program. Meanwhile, our results are in, and the leading answer is, drum roll please, SharePoint 2013 has about a quarter of the listeners today using it. 21% use SharePoint 2010, 18% are online, and 6% have another or older version that they're using. About 3 in 10 of our listeners did not participate in the poll. Thank you, folks in the audience, for participating in the polls, and now I'll return the program to Brian. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Well, those are some surprising results there. I didn't expect such a high percentage of SharePoint 2013. That does bring us sort of to the end of our scheduled program here, so to speak. We did want to make sure that we leave plenty of room at the end of the session here for questions. So, Tom, I think we can jump into questions at this point.
Okay. Let's go to our questions now. We have some good ones. I want to remind our listeners again that they can submit any questions they have about video and SharePoint to Brian through the Q&A tab, and we'll gather those. Our first question comes from Kai Chappell. Can you describe how RAMP can integrate with hosting videos on what has been announced by Microsoft as a video portal that's part of Office 365 and SharePoint Online? Or, she asked, is RAMP's capability a competing video hosting and streaming service?
Absolutely. So the first way I'll answer that is that RAMP is in talks with Microsoft and the Azure Media Services team that built the integration as far as how to better integrate with that solution. The main thing to remember about Office Video is that it is an Office 365 only concept. And with RAMP's ability to handle the on-premises versions of SharePoint as well as live video, we think it's an excellent complementary offering to RAMP's integration and can be used for your video on demand concepts as a stepping stone. But as you get into more advanced information architecture around your video content, and as you get into perhaps on-premises versions of SharePoint, larger amounts of content, or live video streaming, that's where RAMP can really help add robustness to your video offering within your enterprise.
It's a good answer. Thank you for that, Brian. Our next question comes from Song Lee. What kind of video player does RAMP use? Are there any video format limitations? Great question, Song.
That is a great question. And so we do have our own video player called MetaPlayer Framework. And so that player framework can sit on top of perhaps a YouTube player or any other player out in the market that conforms to standards. We also have our own player that we can use for that. And so the short answer there is RAMP has its own player. The little bit longer answer is, but we can integrate with other players. As far as video format limitations, this goes back to the transcoding that I was mentioning earlier in the presentation, that we want to make sure that your video can be played in any browser and on any device. And so we currently accept roughly in the ballpark of 25 video formats, and those video formats will be transcoded into a smaller subset of formats that we use for displaying in Internet Explorer, in Chrome, as well as Android, Windows Phone, and iOS devices.
And I take it if users already have multiple formats in their library, that's not a problem.
That's correct. We can handle that.
Great. Our next question comes from, I believe, Guatemala Naranjo. And he asked, what about bandwidth utilization? We use Microsoft Cloud services, so all the internet browsing concentrates on our main internet access.
That's a great question. And one of the things that we've seen in the marketplace is that concern around bandwidth utilization and around how do we make sure that we are being respectful of the sort of mission critical applications that we see in the enterprise today. And so as we serve the video, we're going to use adaptive bitrate streaming, and we're going to serve that video in many cases over HTTP rather than HTTPS. And you're thinking, Brian, well, you've told me this is secure. That's true. We're going to encrypt the video within HTTP. And what that means is that your existing WAN optimization technology can actually cache that video without having to go out to the public internet every time that video is served, but your content is still secured because the keys for that video are being served from SharePoint. And so you are pulling actually very little from the public internet. And when you are pulling from the public internet, we can downgrade the video experience as necessary.
Great. Here's an interesting question from Joseph Valia. He asked, do we have the option to search videos with voice recognition like Siri?
So that is something that we have taken an approach of making sure that your CMS is the system of record. And so if your CMS today has a voice search option, as many do for things like 508 compliance, you do have the ability to search using your native search within that platform to handle that video search. So all of the metadata is going to be populated into your CMS, and then it's up to your CMS to decide how that content is searched.
Great, very interesting. Victoria Gronauer asks, what challenges are you seeing at the enterprise for tagging metadata?
The number one challenge that we're seeing, honestly, is user adoption for tagging. And so RAMP's natural language processing can tag that content for you and almost create a little bit of a chapterization concept without the need for the user creating those chapters themselves. And so as you work with the content, it will use entity extraction as part of our natural language processing to create those tags, as well as the full searchability of the transcript, both across videos and within a single video.
Interesting. Joshua Barral asked, does RAMP include subtitles? And if so, can it take multiple languages? He says he's interested in subtitles and closed captions in multiple languages. That's, as business gets more global, I guess that's something that RAMP's going to be seeing a bit more of. Is that something you're addressing now?
It is, and it's something we're seeing actually quite frequently. I would say it's picked up within the last 6 months or so. And the answer is emphatically yes. RAMP does include subtitles in a number of subtitle formats. The standard that we use within our own player is called SRT, and that we can create for your individual videos and will automatically be created as part of the processing. We do accept multiple languages today for both transcription as well as translation. So we can transcribe the content in English or Spanish or Italian or Arabic, whatever language the content is in, and then translate that into the other languages. One of the big use cases we're seeing here is through training content. So there's a global technology company that's using this for their training system. And so they are creating all of the content in English and then subtitling using RAMP's transcription and translation. That's a great question.
It is a great question, and it's something that's just fascinating to me. I think we're going to be seeing a lot more of multi-language services soon on the enterprise. Andy Friedrich has a good question, too. He's wondering if you can use WebEx WMF files downloaded from WebEx in your system.
That is something that is actively being pursued. I can't say a whole lot about it right this moment, but I will say stay tuned because you'll see more along those lines coming within the next several months.
Okay, good. A little heads up there. And Song Lee, who had a good question earlier, is back with another. Do you support anonymous access like YouTube? For example, can it be applied to share videos in publishing sites?
Absolutely. So there are sort of two sides to RAMP. The first is the enterprise side, which of course we've been discussing here today. The second is the media side of the house and the mass publishing side. And so we've actually had a way to marry those two sides together in what we're calling video microsites. So you can manage your content in a specially crafted SharePoint site or Polycom, Real Presence Media Manager, or other RAMP integration, and have that publish out to a white labeled site that RAMP is managing for you that of course takes advantage of the full video search, takes advantage of the adaptive bitrate streaming, and takes advantage of the analytics that RAMP is gathering, and that can be functioning as a microsite within your main site, that can be published as part of your existing site, and so on. So there are a number of options there, yes.
Okay. And Steph Sullivan's asked a question that's already been asked about the WebEx format, so I'll skip over that part, but also ask, who provides the translations for subtitles? Is that done in-house, or do you have a sub-service for that?
Yeah, there are two options there. The first is done in-house, yes. The second option is we have human translation services, and really the difference is how accurate of a transcript do you want. I think everybody who's taken a high school language class anytime in the recent past has gone out to Google Translate or something of the like. We're not using anything like that. But we do have the ability to have the 100% accurate translation through human translation. And the point that I want to make on that is that while that is a partner solution, it is not something where we're going to ask you to go find your own partner. It'll all be included on one agreement with RAMP.
That's great. You know, I think in enterprise business that accuracy is going to be vital. And no, you can't use Google Translate for most of that. It's pretty tricky stuff. Josh Burrell is back in line with another question. Does RAMP support a live event streaming?
Absolutely. That is something that we've launched just last month. And so we have live event streaming with in-band PowerPoint management as well. And so what that really means for the end user is when you are watching the CEO town hall and you receive a call from a customer, you no longer have to choose between that customer and the CEO, because you can pause that live event, and while the live event's continuing, talk to your customer, have the conversation that you need to have with your customer, and then jump back to that live event, and you're going to see and hear the CEO, and his slides will still be in time with that, which is something that's unique to the industry. And like I said, has been launched just last month at Streaming Media West, and we are currently demoing that to prospective customers.
Interesting. And here's a great question. This woman has some governance questions in mind. Victoria Gronauer asked, does RAMP have any firewall capabilities for SEC-regulated companies, specifically for financial services firms that have confidential information and other sorts of files like that?
So there are a couple of different ways that this question can be interpreted, so I hope I'm choosing the correct one here. When we talk about firewall capabilities, RAMP has taken the stance that we will never ask you to open ports in your firewall for inbound traffic. There are possibilities where you would need to allow outbound traffic, where your servers would send the video to RAMP. And we can, of course, be very specific about which ports that is. It's all standards-based. And then the content is actually encrypted all the way through the process. And so we have had security audits done by customers, and all have passed. The important thing to remember when you're dealing with video content is you're not necessarily dealing with specific customer information. And so a lot of the regulations are not necessarily as stringent as they would be if perhaps there was account information being shared.
Okay, great. And while we have a pause here, I just want to remind our audience that we do have plenty of time for questions here. So if you have a question about today's program, whether we've covered it or not at this point, we'd really like you to go into the Q&A tab and ask that question, and we'll put that in the queue. Right now, we do have another question about SharePoint search, which is based on SharePoint search is based on which videos each user can see. How does RAMP know which SharePoint permissions to inherit for each video? Interesting question.
When we talk about permissioning, we talk specifically about SharePoint. In SharePoint, permissions can be handled at the item level, at the list or folder level, and then at the site level, as well as the farm level, and getting back out sort of into the universe of permissions. SharePoint has done an excellent job at giving us APIs that we can say, does this user have access to this content? And so rather than try to interpret as people have with SAML gateways or anything of that nature, we are using SharePoint's native authentication and authorization, which really cuts down on the overhead of videos being displayed. And so when we talk about SAML gateways or things of that nature that other people are using, you're not dealing with the 7 requests that takes, you're dealing with the 1 request that this authentication takes. The reason that's important is because your systems have already been configured to handle what I like to call the 9 a.m. rush. And so as your systems are scaling, we want to make sure that you can scale your main infrastructure, not necessarily just your video infrastructure, because that's where you get the best return on your investment. And so the short answer there is SharePoint tells us who has permission to what, and it's inherent with the native SharePoint permissioning.
Thank you. And Song Lee, who's asked a couple of good questions already, is back in line. I'm glad to see you. Thank you for participating in that level, Song Lee. She asked, what kind of tech does RAMP use to support live streaming? Is it Microsoft Azure Media Service or something else? And also, is it a provider-hosted app?
Excellent question. So RAMP today has partnered with Wowza for our live streaming technology. We've built a number of plugins to the existing Wowza functionality to provide that live streaming, such as the encrypted HLS, the inbound PowerPoint slides, and so on. We are, again, in talks with Azure Media Services to use their newly announced live streaming service for that functionality. And yes, in SharePoint 2013, as well as SharePoint Online, it is a provider-hosted app. In SharePoint 2013, that requires a couple of on-premises pieces that are fairly small and lightweight. In SharePoint Online, we are providing that hosting environment.
Okay, great. So the application web environment is all provided by RAMP, is that right?
That is correct for SharePoint Online.
Okay, but not 2013?
For 2013, there is a small component that needs to be installed on customer servers. It is, like I said, small and does not require any proprietary software. It really just enables the authentication piece between RAMP and SharePoint.
Good, good. And Joshua Barral has a question. How strong is your delivery capability to obscure or far remote locations like China, Africa, or India?
Great question. So we have diversified our offering amongst a couple of different CDN providers. Of course, we're going to use our own CDN when possible, but we also have the ability to burst into Amazon Web Services, into Azure, and between those two providers, we have distribution points globally. And so we do have customers that have tested our service in China. We do have customers that have tested our service in India. I can't think of a specific example for Africa, but we have been tested and have succeeded in what are traditionally considered remote locations.
And Joshua has another question too. He was the one who asked about the languages earlier, and he's asking, do you support Chinese or right-to-left languages such as Hebrew or Arabic?
Yes, we do. And so the player framework that I mentioned just a moment ago, and if there's interest, I'm happy to show on the WebEx here, we do have the ability to, in that search bar, within that transcription functionality, within our existing tokenization, handle Chinese and right-to-left languages.
Oh, good. Well, maybe we can do that demonstration. I think we have time for that. Do you want to do that now, or should we take a couple more questions first?
Certainly, I can show the player. Give me just a second here to get that spun up, and then I will share it on the WebEx here.
Great. Again, language is one of those things that we're seeing a lot more of at CMSWire. It comes up a lot in our articles. So I'm glad to hear that RAMP is on top of this. I'm sure many of our listeners are interested in that point as they work for companies that go well beyond any country's borders at this point.
All right, so you should see a thumbnail grid on the screen here.
We do.
All right, so when we jump into a particular video, and we can use this one as an example, we're going to get brought to RAMP's player page. Of course, the player page does have a player on it. I say that semi-sarcastically, of course, because, of course, a player page has a player on it. But this blue bar down at the bottom is what I want you to notice most specifically. And so as we look at this particular video, this housekeeping items, Washington, upstate New York, those are all things that were identified as keywords in the content. And we have the ability to search within the content. I always search for the because the happens in the majority of content. And those white ticks are where that word was said. And so the challenge in handling right-to-left languages that we tackled probably around the area of 8 months ago now was having this blue bar respond to right-to-left languages, as well as this transcript tab for the time-coded metadata. And so that has been done. I realized that my statement a moment ago may have been slightly ambiguous. I have the ability to demo the player. Of course, I don't have any content in Arabic, as I don't speak Arabic. And so I don't have the ability to show any customer content here. But this blue bar is what has been modified to support right-to-left languages.
I'm glad you took a couple of minutes to go through that. It's really interesting to see how this is all pulled together with a the different bars and the comments, the transcript underneath. It's really an interesting format. I see a lot of links in those comments. Am I in the transcript, or am I not seeing that correctly?
Absolutely. Nope, that's correct. So each word in the transcript is given a timestamp and a duration, as well as a confidence score. So this was transcribed using our speech-to-text technology. Anything you see with a dash dash is not a word that was unrecognized. It's a word that we weren't confident enough in the word that we recognized to display to the user. But each word is given a timestamp, and if we click on any word in this transcript, we can jump directly to that point in the video. And so you'll notice it went from 1:37 seconds to 2:08 seconds. The other thing that time-coded transcript allows us to do is search natively within SharePoint. And let me increase the size of my font here. If I search for mobile in SharePoint, we'll be taken to SharePoint's native search page, and here's a video where mobile is not in the title. There is no description, there's no tag, so where did we find mobile? We found it at 36 seconds, at 3:40 seconds, and 3:42 seconds, and we can jump directly into that point in the video. And so as we talk about the ability to create chapterization, not every video is going to warrant that level of effort, and so we can create the ability to discover the content and discover the exact pieces of the content that you need without having to spend time chapterizing each and every single piece of content.
It's a very impressive capability that you're able to search through the transcripts that rapidly. Is there much of a time lag normally on searches, or does it depend on the term you're looking for?
So the searches, we have sort of pre-populated the metadata. And so that's going to be a function of your specific search functionality. The actual transcription takes about the length of the content. Of course, there is a floor on that of about 10 minutes. But as your video content is processed, it's populated back into your SharePoint environment, and you'll receive an email when it's completed.
So I'm sorry, when you say there's a floor of 10 minutes, does that mean it starts after 10 minutes? Or
it will take at least 10 minutes to process content because we've got to move the files around and spin up the appropriate resources.
Okay.
But typically it's about 1 time the length of the content, 1 to 2 times.
What about content length? Is there any length limitation on that?
There is no content length limitation. Likewise, there are no content size limitations in RAM. Some of the underlying technologies in SharePoint do have size limitations. We have sidestepped those to avoid the traditionally 50 megabyte limit that SharePoint has. But as we process the video, the file itself, the binary of the video is not going back into SharePoint, it's going into our cloud. So there's no need to worry about that 50 megabyte limit, or some who even increased it to 400, 500 megabyte limit. There's no need to worry about being under that limit and sacrificing video quality to stay under that limit.
I understand. Joshua is back with another question. He was wondering if we can embed videos in a web page or a non-SharePoint environments.
Absolutely, and let me find a video. I believe this one is enabled for it. If not, I'll enable it. Within our sharing menu, which I'll show you as soon as this comes up, we have the ability to share to Outlook, to Yammer, or copying a link. And we can share from 0 seconds, from the current point in time in the video, or from the beginning of the video. And this video is actually not enabled for it, so let me go ahead and do that now. We have a flag on the video itself that allows you to decide whether that video is for internal use only or for public use. So if I set this to public and save that content, and then I can jump back into that exact page, and within that same sharing menu, I now have the ability to embed that video. And so that iframe code can be dropped on any page. The one warning that I give with this specific piece of functionality is that embed functionality does stop the security mechanism for anybody that has that iframe code. If you believe that that iframe has been compromised or it went public and it was not supposed to, we do have the ability to retract that iframe, but anybody with access to that iframe code is able to use that specific functionality. And of course, we do have the ability to turn off that public embed for all videos in the site.
Great. Joshua was always also wondering if we can provide our own transcripts and translations. That's a good question.
Absolutely. And so we will take that transcript and, you know, oftentimes in highly produced content, that's a script. And we can take and do what we call automated text alignment to give you that time coding on your existing transcript. So yes, we do have that ability. And then of course, from that transcript, we can put that into the SRT formats or other captioning formats, and we can accept those captioning formats as inputs as well.
I think I know the answer to this next question. How does your platform handle streaming video over low bandwidth connections? I'm guessing that it adjusts to them.
It does. We use our adaptive bitrate streaming, and the adaptive bitrate streaming goes everywhere from, you know, 1080p is sort of the standard in television right now, so we can handle the 1080p. We can also drop all the way down to as low as 160p, and 160p is what traditional 3G cell phone connections can handle. So low bandwidth situations, particularly when you get down into cell phone range, is able to be handled by the system, yep.
I would imagine that's going to be something that's even more and more important as we do more and more mobile, and that comes up in the enterprise right now.
Absolutely. What we're seeing is the, go ahead.
No, you continue, Brian.
What we're seeing is sort of a lag in the 4G rollout. So we're maintaining 3G, 4G, as well as standard bandwidth connections.
Okay, great. And I imagine that when you serve the video, you use responsive design or some similar technology for mobile devices.
We do, absolutely. The responsive design happens both in the player as well as in any search page that RAMP renders. We will use responsive design to make sure that as you shrink the device or as you shrink the browser, you're getting to a point where the menus look slightly different to accommodate the smaller space, as well as the player bar will be changing in a future release that's coming up to allow for better responsive design.
What kind of breakdown are you seeing in terms of iOS versus Droid versus other systems? Do you keep any data on who's looking at these on what kinds of devices?
We do keep data on that. We keep that more traditionally down to form factor level, and we've been seeing, just like everyone else in the industry, an uptick in tablet usage. And so having a design that is able to be very, very touch-friendly is important. We are seeing a mix of Android and iOS. I would say that depending on the types of content, you know, we're starting to see in the industry somewhat of a split in demographic between iOS devices as well as Android devices. And so what we're seeing, interestingly, is the split in the types of content consumed by the different demographics. And so I can't necessarily declare a winner in that battle. It's really, you know, content specific.
Okay, good. I think you answered this earlier, but let me ask it again. What is the expected accuracy of your speech-to-text engine? And I think you said that you have the capability of making it up to 100%, but you want to address that again?
Yes. So, sorry about that. You were breaking up. The automated speech-to-text technology really depends on the quality of the audio. And so if you are having a telephone conversation with a lot of background noise, that's perhaps going to have a lower quality than a studio-produced piece of content or even a webinar. where we can get up into the high 80s, low 90s% accuracy. But for that 100% accuracy, which typically works out to be 10 to 15% of your content, you need the 100% accuracy, we do offer human transcription.
Yes, that's what I remembered you saying. Thank you. Shirley Zhang has a question for us. Are analytics available to the meeting host?
In terms of a live event, yes, analytics are available. They are available in real time as in terms of number of viewers. After the event, they are more granular as to what form factor and things of that nature are being used. When we talk about user-level analytics or anything like that, my best answer there is stay tuned. Within the next couple months, you'll see a lot of change in that particular area.
I get the feeling there'll be some big news from RAMP in the spring. Am I right in thinking that you have a few announcements coming up for us?
I would say that that is accurate, yes.
And RAMP has a large and very popular conference. I think it was in San Francisco this year. Do you know when that is and when we'll be seeing that?
I'm sorry, what was that?
The RAMP conference, I believe it was in San Francisco this year.
RAMP attends a number of conferences.
The one that we attended. I think I saw you at another conference this year, and thought it was a RAMP. It was a great presentation.
Yes, we were at SP TechCon, a technology-focused SharePoint conference in San Francisco this past fall, and we will be at SP TechCon in Austin, Texas, that is, in February of this year.
Great.
Or sorry, February of next year, since February of this year was 9 months ago.
We have just a couple of minutes left, and I've got another question from Song Lee here. But before we go to that, Brian, did you have anything else you wanted to demonstrate, or could you return us to the regular slide deck?
I can return to the regular slide deck.
Okay, great. And if you'll give me the controls back, I'll take this last question, and then we'll close down the show. And it's fittingly from Song Lee, who has asked so many good questions this afternoon. Thank you for this. RAMP has its own permission management system, or does it just integrate its permission with SharePoint, or is that optional?
So the answer there is largely yes. I know that's a little bit non-committal. RAMP does have a permission management system for our non-integrated solutions. For our integrated solutions, what we've tried to do is make sure that we have a system of record mentality where SharePoint really owns the content, and we're enabling SharePoint to own that content. And so in that SharePoint system, you are using SharePoint's native permissions.
Great. Joshua, who also asked several good questions, has one final one, which will lead into our thank you slide. Is there a newsletter where people can learn more about what you're talking about today, or do they need to go to ramp.com for more information?
Going to ramp.com is a great place of information. RAMP has a blog that is updated very frequently with industry news as well as RAMP-specific news. The other great resource, which I believe is one of our, is actually on the screen now, you can follow RAMP's Twitter handle, you can follow my Twitter handle, and of course CMSWire for CMS-specific information to stay up to date on the latest happenings.
Great. And of course, you can follow Brian at BR Prigge on Twitter, or you can follow me at Tom Murphy BA. I'd love to have you follow us, and I put up some stuff that may be of interest to you. And I think that's going to wrap up our program today. So I'll say a big, big thank you to Brian Prigge and to all our attendees, particularly the folks who asked so many good questions during our Q&A portion. I think that was a record-length Q&A portion, and I think we got a lot of good information out there. This webinar has been recorded. The video and recap article will be emailed to you and available on CMSWire within just a couple of days. We encourage you to go visit ramp.com and get more information. And if your company is interested in sponsoring a webinar like this one, please email us at advertising@cmswire.com. I want to thank our production crew today, John Lewis and Candace Quee, for putting on such a great program behind the scenes. Again, thank you to Brian Prigge. Signing off for CMSWire and Simpler Media Group, this is Tom Murphy. Have a great day.